Hello friends, welcome to lesson 48, Urban Public Spaces. The objectives of this lesson. After completion of this lesson, you will be able to elaborate the concept of urban public space and its benefits. You will be able to analyze the role of urban public spaces and also understand about urban design and urban public spaces. We all know that cities are human creations. They provide an immense variety of cultural and recreational facilities such as concert halls, museums, sports, stadiums, educational facilities and all types of restaurants and other recreational facilities. Cities bring them together, yield opportunities or constrain people's behavior. The term urban public space implies public spaces in cities. A public space is a social space such as a public park, garden, town square, etc. that is open and accessible to all regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, age or socio-economic levels. Public space is a commonly shared and created for open usage throughout the community. Public spaces are useful in successful regeneration policies for creating sustainable communities as well. The public spaces provide social arenas for all kinds of people including residents and visitors. Also, public gardens add social cohesion in the community by providing a meeting place and a chance for people to work together towards a common goal. Green urban spaces provide the required lung spaces for fresh air to its residents in addition to their social and aesthetic values. Now let us try to understand about urban public space slightly in detail. Economic globalization has meant that urban public space is an asset for cities looking to attract companies or appeal to a mobile workforce. Cities increasingly compete with one another for outside investment. Quality design and careful management of public space can add to a city's competitive advantage. Seeking to maximize the value of public space for attracting investors, appealing to workers and drawing tourists, managers of urban public space nowadays strive to cultivate a perception of safety. This often leads to policing public spaces to control the presence of unwanted demographics. Public spaces are defined as places in urban settings where people can congregate and interact with one another. Parks, public plazas, squares and other open spaces are included in these locations. Urban space depends on the fine structure of its boundaries, requiring much greater care than the architectural treatment of interior space. Urban space follows a social logic that influences its growth. This component is analyzed by Bill Hillier and his collaborators in detail. According to them, the urban design must be such that there should be a connectivity amongst paths, spaces and the design of the buildings, though these essential connections are very difficult to describe. The urban fabric is composed of many different components whose underlying mechanisms cannot be grasped all at once. Urban space should have certain qualities if it is to be responsive to human feelings and sensibilities. Historical spaces were the result of intuition, traditional rules of thumb, social conditions and the limitations of available materials. They were probably neither the result of conscious thought nor the application of a set of rules. Nowadays, the complexity of human interaction with space is more complicated. It helps to provide a set of rules for urban space. Nature offers us the example of fractal, that is, shapes divided into smaller copies. Structures and historical urban spaces do have fractal qualities. The processes that generate successful urban space, that is, the space that is used and which feels emotionally nourishing, is based on these aspects. Firstly, urban space is bounded by surfaces that present unambiguous information. Secondly, the spatial information field determines the connective web of the parts and the nodes. Thirdly, the core of urban space is pedestrian space protected from the non-pedestrian traffic. The three urban space axioms therefore influence the entire layout of public space and also the buildings. They also provide general rules governing the shape of building fronts, structural details and also the materials. All of this become interdependent in helping to define the urban space. The axioms or the principles operate at a more basic level than the large scale design decisions. Plans, patterns, the symmetry, access, etc., while important, are only of secondary importance relative to the fundamental processes that generate urban space. When public spaces are successful, they increase opportunities to participate in community activities. This openness and community centrism nurtures the growth of public life, which otherwise is stunted by social isolation of low income neighborhoods and the suburbs. In the parks, plazas, waterfronts and natural areas of our cities, people from different cultural groups can come together in a supportive context of mutual enjoyment. As these experiences are repeated, public spaces become vessels to carry positive communal meanings. Streets and public spaces define the character and also the charisma of a city. From squares and roads to neighborhood gardens and also the children's playgrounds, public space frames the city image. The connective matrix of streets and public spaces forms the skeleton of city upon which all else rests. Public space takes many spatial forms, including parks, streets, sidewalks and footpaths that connect, playgrounds of recreation, marketplaces, but also the edge space between buildings or the roadsides, which are often important spaces for the urban poor. The public space forms the settings for display of different splendid activities such as the ceremonial festivities of the multicultural city, trade for the commercial city, the movement of goods and people, provision of infrastructure, or the setting for community life and livelihoods of the urban poor, for example, street vendors or the waste pickers. Having sufficient open public space allows cities and towns to function efficiently and equitably. The network of open public space not only improves the quality of life but also the mobility and functioning of the city. Well designed and maintained streets and open public spaces can help lower the rates of crime and violence also. It also enables to make space for formal and informal economic activities and avail the services and opportunities to a diversity of users. It is particularly for the most marginalized where public space is the poor man's living room and important for recreation, social, cultural and economic development. Public space as a common good is the key enabler for the fulfillment of human rights, empowering women and providing opportunities for youth. The investments in streets and public spaces infrastructure also improve the urban productivity, livelihoods, and allows better access to markets, jobs and public services, especially in developing countries where over half of the urban workforce is informal. It is the role of local governments to ensure adequate provision of these spaces, particularly because the private sector, which plays a key role in urban development, has little incentive to provide them. As cities and urban areas all over the world continue to grow at unprecedented rates, often diversifying beyond the formal operational sphere also, there is a need to continuously support the local and national governments in developing legislation, policy and norms and practices which support them to adopt a holistic and integrated approach to the planning, design, development, creation, protection and also management of public spaces. Ideally, urban planning systems should have the requirement of adequate public space as part of local and municipal plans. The local governments should be able to design the network of public space as part of their development plans and work with communities to foster social inclusion, gender equality, incorporate multiculturalism and also biodiversity and enhance the urban livelihoods, which would in turn contribute to sustainable, productive and also prosperous urban systems and communities along with urban development. However, many local governments are surrendering this role. As a result, rapid urbanization is proceeding in an uncontrolled manner, yielding settlement patterns with dangerously low proportions of public space. Even the planned areas of new cities have sizably reduced allocations of land for public space. To ensure adequate foundation for a well-functioning and prosperous city, UN Habitat recommends an average of 45 to 50% of urban land be allocated to streets and open public spaces, which includes 30 to 35% for streets and sidewalks and 15 to 20% for urban public space. Let us understand the role of urban public spaces. Public space is a vital part of everyday urban life. The streets urban residents pass through on the way to school or work, the places where children play, the local parks in which the urban residents enjoy sports and sit at lunchtime. Public space is an open air living room for city dwellers, ensuring good quality, multifunctional and well connected public space which reflects class, gender, age and ethnic differences in how people use these spaces is crucial element of urban design and development. Some groups such as women, children, people with disabilities, undocumented migrants or the poor may be excluded from the public spaces if they are unsafe. Therefore, a good city should foster social cohesion and build social capital, engaging the community in design, management and also maintenance of the public space. Urban public spaces are collaborative efforts including public space creation, protection, management and also enjoyment. These are the ideal opportunities for the involvement of all citizens, ensuring that individual and differentiated interests they culminate at one place. It is important to tap into the collective wisdom of those who know the community best that is its citizens and inhabitants. Good public spaces can play a decisive role in this regard by allowing for orderly and rational development, that is street connectivity, attracting investment, uses and activities, increasing property values, thus generating additional municipal revenue, providing opportunities for economic development and also the consequent enhanced livelihood opportunities while generating tax revenue for the local governments. It also helps in contributing value addition to a city's cultural, historical and architectural endowment, thus enhancing urban attractiveness and also promoting tourism. It also helps in providing room for social and cultural interaction, which fosters a sense of belonging. Well designed and well maintained streets and public spaces can help to reduce the fear of crime and violence and thus contribute to improving the safety and security in the cities. A good network of public spaces can help to improve our physical and mental health by encouraging us to walk and play, making walking more attractive, reducing stress and providing a calming environment. It also helps in increasing mobility. One of the very fundamental functions of the public space is that it allows us to move around from our homes to work, schools and other amenities on foot, by bicycle, by car, motorbike or public transport. Green and open public space brings many important environmental benefits such as the cooling of air and also the absorption of atmospheric pollutants. It also facilitates in promoting inclusion, which is achieved through creation and or improvement of spaces to be friendly to women, children, youth and also the elderly. The creation, rehabilitation, protection and management of public space is most often the prevalent responsibility of local governments. This requires the active collaboration of citizens, civil society and the private sector. As such, the purpose of monitoring progress against the Sustainable Development Goal 11, Target 11.7, Indicator 11.7.1 is to provide necessary and timely information to decision makers and stakeholders. This is for the informed decisions and accelerate progress towards providing universal access to safe, inclusive and accessible green public spaces, in particular for different demographic groups like women, children, elderly and persons with disabilities. The regular monitoring and reporting will be done every 5 years, allowing for 3 reporting time points until the year 2030. Let us discuss the important benefits of urban public spaces. There are multiple benefits of urban public spaces. Let us elaborate on some of these benefits. Firstly is the ecological benefit of urban public spaces. It includes green urban public spaces providing a habitat for variety of birds, fish, animals, insects and also the other organisms of ecosystem. It provides corridors and greenways to link habitats. It prevents soil erosion. Plants in the urban parks help in reducing heat. The green urban spaces can also reduce noise pollution. Finally, green urban public spaces and their inhabitants are good indicators of overall ecological health of the ecosystem. This is an important measure in judging the ecological sustainability of the community. There are also social benefits of urban public spaces. What are they? It fosters community relationships and helps in the process of socialization by encouraging community relationships and tolerance. To young people and marginalized group, it gives a sense of territorial ownership. Green urban public spaces induce nature into the urban environment. They provide refreshing contrast to the harsh shape, color and texture of the buildings and stimulate the senses with simple cosmic color, sound, smell and motions. They increase the importance of the cities and help in developing sustainable cities to a great extent. The public spaces retain democratic and civic functions alongside commercially driven uses. The policymakers should support and also encourage the restoration and maintenance of the urban public spaces. The urban public spaces, especially the green urban places, are a bliss and solution to many urban problems of contemporary times. Urban design and urban public spaces. When we discuss about urban design, it involves the arrangement and design of buildings, public spaces, transport systems and services and also the amenities. Urban design, as we know, is the process of giving form, shape and characters to group of buildings, to whole neighborhoods and the city. It is a framework that orders the elements into a network of streets, squares and blocks. The urban design blends architecture, landscape architecture and also city planning to make urban areas functional and attractive. The prevalent thinking about urban design is that the new community should be compact, mixed in both housing and also the commercial development, affordable and pedestrian. This means a move back to living in compact, relatively self-sufficient communities and neighborhoods have affordable housing, jobs and retail markets within easy walking distance for its residents. When we talk about developing, designing and regenerating public spaces, assume that physical attributes of the public spaces contribute to their local reputations and the way the groups used them. The designing of any space, including the public spaces, must include designs that aims to include people of all social strata and age group, including children and also the elderly. It should be based on public consultation and involvement. The regeneration of public spaces is often a key aspect of plan to revive the town centers. It is often seen that architects, planners, builders and designers all care deeply about the personal spaces that they create, but few have been concerned with the state of our public space. Indicator 11.7.1 has several concepts whose definitions require global consultations and consensus. These include, among others, the built up area, cities and open spaces for public use. As the main custodian agency for SDG 11, UN Habitat has engaged many partners and held several expert group and consultative meetings to come up with globally applicable and acceptable definitions. Let us try to understand the critical dimensions of these definitions. When we discuss about city, this indicator adopts a functional as opposed to administrative boundary based delimitation of a city. The recommended functional definition follows the concept of urban extent developed by New York University and applied on a global sample of 200 cities. This definition views a city as an operational entity that incorporates both built up areas and open spaces which often extend beyond official formal administrative boundaries. When it comes to built up area, this is the contiguous part of a city occupied by buildings and other impervious surfaces. However, built up area as used in the indicator denominator means the same thing as the functional city area. With reference to public space, the Charter of Public Space defines public spaces as all places publicly owned or of public use, accessible and enjoyable by all for free and without a profit motive. This definition favors public ownership because such ownership guarantees more stable access and enjoyment over a period of time. The Charter further distinguishes between four types of public spaces. Firstly, streets, secondly, open public spaces, thirdly, public facilities, and fourthly, markets. When we talk about streets, they are defined as thoroughfares that are based inside towns, cities and neighborhoods and are commonly lined with houses or buildings and offer an essential urban function for both the pedestrians and vehicles mobility. They are public spaces by virtue of their being publicly owned and maintained, accessible and enjoyable by all, mostly without charge and at all hours. Streets are versatile in activities they host, which range from social and economic to cultural and political uses. The main elements included within the street space are avenues and roads, squares and plazas, pavements, passages and galleries, bicycle paths, sidewalks, traffic islands and tramways, and also the roundabouts. Elements excluded from street space include plots, that is built up or unbuilt up, open space blocks, railways, paved space within parking lots and airports, and also individual industries. Secondly, open public spaces. It refers to the undeveloped land or land with no buildings or other built structures that is accessible to the public and that provides recreational areas for residents and helps to enhance the beauty and environmental quality of neighborhoods. The different types of open public space vary across cities and can broadly include parks, gardens, playgrounds, public beaches, river banks and waterfronts. These spaces are also available to all without charge and normally publicly owned and maintained. In many cases, however, they are accessible during daylight hours only. When we talk about public facilities, friends, it comprises of high maintenance amenities places that are publicly owned and maintained and are accessible to users without any charge, such as public libraries, civic or community centers, municipal markets and public sports facilities. In many cases, these facilities are only accessible during the daylight hours or operating hours. Studies conducted in 4 countries by Global Public Space Program at UN Habitat have established that while the management of public facilities could be complex in terms of free access as some services attract a charge, the non-built up parts of the facilities are an important open space that is freely available to citizens and that it should be included as part of a city's public open space. While discussing about public commercial spaces, we should remember these are the areas which host markets and accessible commercial activities in fixed premises, public venues and other services, collective and not public and private, in which the socio-economic dimension of the city is always expressed. For the purpose of monitoring and reporting on indicator 11.7.1, public space is defined as all places of public use accessible by all and comprises streets and public open spaces. It excludes the non-built up parts of public facilities and public commercial spaces. Cities are, however, encouraged to collect information on all the four components of the public space. According to UN Habitat City-wide Public Space Strategies, the Guide for Local Governments Draft Report 2018, public open spaces can be categorized into four broad levels based on their individual sizes and catchment, that is, how far a user might travel to visit them. It includes firstly the local pocket open public spaces. These are small parklets that service the recreation needs of the immediate residential population within a walking distance or 400 meters or 5 minutes walk. Their average areas range from 0.03 to 0.04 hectares and are often used for recreation purposes. In some places, these may include small areas of nature space. Secondly, the neighborhood public open spaces. These are larger spaces which serve the recreational and social needs of a community. Their areas range from 0.04 and 0.4 hectares and can easily be accessed within 400 meters walking distances from the households. They can accommodate a variety of activities such as recreation, sporting and natural features conservation. Thirdly, the district or city open spaces these are mainly designed to provide for an organized formal sport. They include substantial recreation areas and some nature spaces. They serve several neighborhoods with players and visitors traveling from surrounding districts also. The size of the spaces ranges from 0.4 to 10 hectares and are designed to serve population within 800 meters or 10-minute walking distance. Fourthly, the regional or open space larger city parks. These are substantial facilities for organized sport, play, social interaction, relaxation and enjoyment of nature. They serve one or more geographical or social regions and are likely to attract visitors from outside any one local government area. Their areas range between 10 and 50 hectares for that matter. Fifthly, the national metropolitan open public spaces. These are large spaces whose areas range from 50 and 200 hectares. They support concurrent uses and contain such services as recreational, sporting and basic amenities. Matthew Carmona, professor and architect at Bartlett School of Planning, University College London, UK, urges policymakers to be more responsive to the full range of urban space types. He offers an extensive list of how public spaces appear in the contemporary city. He classifies different types of urban public space as either positive, negative, ambiguous or private spaces and identifies how these combine in distinct ways. The labels Carmona uses reflect a particular normative view of that calls for spaces that support democratic engagement, foster cultural and social exchange and generate comfort. Positive and negative labels thus refer to spaces that clearly function to support or frustrate such a view. These labels should not be read as characterizing a space as good or bad. Instead, these are meant to capture the multiple ways that public spaces appear in the world and how some of these are designed and managed in ways that prioritize travel and transportation, certainly an important public use, and how others foster social interaction. Public spaces define the image of the city and quality of life for its residents. There is an urgent need to focus on the socio-economic, cultural and the environmental values of public spaces that can be leveraged to build sustainable and resilient urban development. In recognition of this, National Institute of Urban Affairs with the support of Oasis Designs has brought out an e-book, namely Transforming Urban Landscape in India, a compendium of 75 public spaces in June 2022. Friends, now let us conclude this lesson. It is time to make cities more attractive by paying proper attention in designing the urban public spaces to increase the quality of life of people. Regeneration of public spaces is often a key aspect of plan to revive town centers. It is often seen that architects, planners, builders and designers all care deeply about the personal spaces that they have created, but few have been concerned with the state of our public space. More attention must be given to urban public space by planners and developers and involve the local bodies and also communities in managing and caring them. Community involvement therefore is extremely important. One example is in small and medium cities. New playground construction is often a community project involving teachers, parents, public officials and children themselves. Therefore, public spaces can go a long way in creation of sustainable cities. Thank you.